It's so important to do the biggest little thing that you have time, money, and political will to do, and get that done, build some trust, and then do the next biggest little things.
Welcome to That's Her Problem, the podcast where women who lead, connect, and rewrite the rules get real about building community. The challenges we face aren't always the same as everyone else's. But here's the truth. A city that's good for women is good for everyone. I'm your host, Patty Weens. Hi, friends. Welcome to That's Her Problem. A couple of weeks ago, I started the episode by acknowledging my Patreon supporters at the top of the episode. And you know what? I'm going to do that again today. Thank you, Andrew, Michael, Nikki, Halls Emporium, Tim, Luke, Linda, Rod, Julia, David, Stephanie, Jason, Cassie, Emma, and this week's new supporter, Misty. You too can support me on Patreon by going to pattybikes.com/podcast and clicking on the Patreon link. I would also love to hear from you with any suggestions for guests. And thank you, Phil from Dayton, Ohio in the United States for sending a suggestion via my website this week. I love the suggestion and will definitely follow up on it. I recorded today's episode a couple of months ago, and it's actually kind of perfect timing to release it. If you're in Winnipeg, you recognize some of the themes we talk about, like walking on the frozen river path. Pay attention. There will be a little quiz in the end to see if you catch something interesting. If you haven't bought my book yet, it's officially out worldwide, and let's grab one. Here it is. It's called That'll Never Work Here, Challenging the Myths Around Biking in a Winter City. It's book 2 of the City Project by Great Plains Press, edited by Michelle and Emma Durandwood. Let's get to our conversation. Hazel is such an interesting speaker. She did a TEDx talk that I'll refer to a lot, and I urge you to watch it after this. Let's get to it. Here's Hazel. Hazel Borys, welcome to That's Her Problem.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
You are the Director of Property, Planning and Development here for the city of Winnipeg. So your department looks after building and renovating, some permits, right?
That's right.
City planning, design initiatives, land development, and more. I remember when you got the job, and there was a lot of talk among all the urbanists, in the urbanist discord and in urbanist circles all over the city, because your reputation preceded you. So I'd like our listeners to hear a little bit about your superhero urbanist origin story.
Aw, thanks, Patty. Well, I appreciate those good words. I mean, I think the urbanists in Winnipeg are the biggest reason, or one of the biggest reasons that drew me to this job and made me excited about this new role for the last couple of years now. I think my urbanism, or maybe my urbanism origin story, really started because when I went to first grade, my mom started a health food store. And it wasn't just, in a strip mall somewhere. It was always on a main street somewhere that really was convening community. So Jane Jacobs would call her a public character that kind of took care of the street and the people and convened those conversations. And so from an early age, I enjoyed the power of just convening a conversation, inviting people to share their voices, their stories, their histories, their perspectives, and then putting those ideas together in new ways that create something different, which I would define as the definition of development. Mm-hmm. And so then I went off to university to become an engineer. And while I was getting that degree, and actually my next degree, which was an MBA in finance and marketing, then once I finished those 2 degrees, I quickly went off to work for American Electric Power, first trading electricity on the commodities trading floor, and then buying and selling oil and natural gas companies through the mergers and acquisitions part of the company. And I think those two things together, road building for a while and understanding some of the impacts of those wide, fast roads, and understanding where they belong. There's a place for everything and everything in its place. But then streets need to change their nature as they move through the urban realm.
Mm-hmm.
And so the combination of that and then spending so much time looking at the forward curves for energy and understanding that we can't keep running the interstate system with the energy supplies that we have at hand. Something needs to give. And so when I got married and wanted to start a family and stop working those 80-hour work weeks, although still they sometimes creep in.
I would imagine.
Yeah, but that's when I started working with placemakers. And my siblings are both architects, and them and several other urbanist friends of theirs had started the firm 9 months before I joined it. And so I spent 20 years with placemakers. My job at first was the business end of things, to try to come up with economic structures to pay for all of their excellent urbanist ideas. But then early on in the firm, at first we worked mainly for private developers. And early on, the number one thing we ran into that stopped us from delivering those walkable, bikeable places that are also skiable, skatable, sleddable places.
I like how you say that. Walkable, bikeable, skiable,
skatable,
sleddable. Wow.
I like kick sledding with my dog,
Okay.
So the number one thing that was standing in our way was the zoning. So we decided to become innovators on studying how we could rewrite zoning in a different way. And then we realized it's not enough just if our little firm is doing this. We need to share our ideas as quickly as humanly possible. So we started doing multi-day in-person workshops to train everybody else on the things that we had learned through the process, working at that time across the U.S. and a little bit more in Western Canada, and then globally. Doing those workshops and webinars and blogging and doing studies to share those ideas as quickly as possible was really my urbanism origin story.
And so placemakers, you talk about placemakers in your TED Talk, which I listened to in preparation for today. And it sounds like a bit of a dream, a group of like-minded individuals who happen to be related get together to teach the world how we can go back in time, but still moving forward. One thing that you said that I thought was really interesting is that North Americans spend more hours in their cars than anyone else on earth. And a large part of that is because laws separate where we live from where we work, learn, and shop, and insist on big, fast roads connecting it all. Even in Brazil, when we were growing up, a lot of my childhood was spent in a neighborhood where around the corner, the neighbor had set up a shop for quick items that we needed to buy, like a little convenience store. My hairdresser was across the street, and everything was really close. And my dad picked a place to live that was close to his job as well, so that we didn't have to be so car dependent. So is that one of the goals of placemakers, is to sort of work with what you have, but bring back the feeling of community?
That's right. That's a really excellent summary of it. And also to understand that not everyone wants to ever drive a car. Partly some people are too old, too young, too poor, or they just choose not to. It's there are other pleasant ways to move through space.
One of the things that I found really interesting too is when you talk about how much things are worth, how much a property is worth, how much a property generates revenue for the city, and what we might think is generating revenue is really sucking revenue out of the city. For example, single family and homes, I guess is what we call it.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Versus a tall, apartment building or a condo building with several units in it with mixed use.
That's right. I like to think of it as a portfolio of place. So it's okay having those single family, detached, freestanding homes as long as you have enough of those higher density places to be able to comfortably pay for it. So cities are the most lively when they're diverse and when it's not all a monoculture of just tall, apartment or condo buildings or just single family detached homes. But when it's both of those and also everything in between, all of that middle housing as well, to create kind of that range of places that people tend to move through their lifetimes. I mean, you look at Copenhagen in the 70s, right? A totally different city than it is today. And so you can see what shifting policies do. And, we're on the second round of our Winnipeg and the second round of complete communities that create very strong policy for these high performance places for people, planet, and profit, really for that, trifecta of resilience. And so I feel that, now we're getting ready to do a full zoning bylaw rewrite over the next 2 years. And the first many months will be a deep listening session with the community and to say, what is not working about the rules today and how can we change those rules to allow that as of right or by right development to happen faster and more in line with today's market demands. So there's not anything about that that's a one size fits all. It requires this range of different rules. And so there's more kind of use-based rules for those single-use, predominantly drivable places. And then there's much more complex rules for the walkable, mixed-use places. So it's kind of a hybrid, form-based and use-based zoning bylaw. And I did spend quite a lot of years studying the places that are starting to do these sorts of rewrites. So when I first started teaching this almost 23 years ago now, the first thing people wanted to know is where else on earth are making these sort of regulatory changes to create these lively, high return on investment places. So I started cataloging them and I started studying them, and many of them I wrote with our team together, we did. And so starting to share those innovations to say, this place wrote this zoning bylaw, it's very good for insomnia. Just read zoning bylaws.
I can't even imagine.
So I chronicled all that on codesstudy.org. And then people, once their question wasn't, well, who else is doing this? And, did their world implode or did they go on and be able to still realize their dreams? And so once that was no longer people's predominant question when they would come to the workshops, the next question was, well, what are the paybacks? And so then we launched codescore.org to start to look at my 135 favorite studies. Most of those are peer reviewed, to look at what are those impacts to, municipal bottom line, developer bottom line, household cost bottom line, but also public health and environmental health as well. So, starting to parse those studies and also to look at what the different drivers are for all of those indicators within those three big categories. So codescore.org is where that lives. And I really love that process of saying, all right, well, this is a lot of heavy lifting to change all of our rules to line up with all of those council adopted policies that most cities have really good policies to say the sorts of development we want to encourage here. It's a lot harder to get to the rules. So that's, every and or counts, and every semicolon or period counts. So words matter.
And so one day I watched one of 30 some hours you spent talking to city councilors. We're big city council YouTube nerds in our house. Mostly Ian. He watches hours and hours. He has it on in the background instead of music sometimes. And how are you finding the difference between what you know, what you've studied, what you've seen, and having to deal with the political will of trying to implement some of these changes and prove to city councilors that what's good for one area of the city is also good for the rest of the city? Because we have this mentality here, I notice, and I think it's prevalent in a lot of cities, where it's very much, well, this is my ward. I need to represent this ward, so I want this for my ward. Whereas zoning changes may start to be studied in the core, like we are doing right now, but they are good for the whole city.
Well, I think that 100% of what the city of Winnipeg is doing right now is all at city council direction. So they have adopted our Winnipeg twice now, the version 1 and version 2, and they've adopted complete communities twice now, version 1 and version 2, and they negotiated city council with, the federal government, not just for the Housing Accelerator Fund agreement, but also for the Canadian Housing and Infrastructure Fund dollars that will go to support the North End treatment plant and other infrastructure for water and sewer treatment throughout the city, and then also 10 years of transit funding. So all of that funding, which is over $600 million, is dependent on these zoning changes happening. So really everything we're doing right now is at 100% the bequest of council. And even this full zoning rewrite, those 30 plus hours of city council public hearings for both the malls and corridors zoning upgrades and the infill housing zoning upgrades, all of that will just slide straight over to the full zoning bylaw replacement. And that will not get renegotiated except, a councilor's request for small tweaks that can better serve the community, because no zoning is ever, cast in stone. It always changes in response to users over time. But for us, I feel like what's happening here is something that's very applicable worldwide. And I think it's so important to do the biggest little thing that you have time, money, and political will to do, and get that done, build some trust, and then do the next biggest little thing. So we've been at this for a while with this kind of hackathon of what's the biggest little thing we could change right now and make people's lives a bit better, make the public service a little more responsive to that collective market demand. And then let's do the next biggest little thing.
So I like this idea, but can you give me an example? What the next biggest little thing? Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that.
The next biggest little thing is giant. So, but how we got here, a couple of years ago, we said, because of changes at the provincial level, before I arrived, development permits and building permits needed to be split apart because there were timers put on each of them. And so they were separated so that the timer for the development permit the timer for the building permit would not start until the development permit was issued. So that was clear and we could hit those provincial timeframes or do our best to try. But we said, does everything need a development permit, or are there some types of development that could just move straight to a building permit. And people could, sign off and say, yes, I acknowledge that it is my responsibility to comply with these various things. So for instance, if you're just repaving your parking lot and you're using the same materials and you're not changing the driveways or the approaches to get into it, you sign off that those things are true, and then you just need to bring in a building permit. You don't need that development permit anymore. So it saves a lot of time and a lot of money.
That's huge.
So as long as you're following the rules, you can do that. So last year we said, these are 25 types of development that don't need a development permit. And then last month we said, actually there's 11 more. Let's add that to these. So that was the biggest little thing. And then, well, what's the next biggest? Let's add some more to it. So then after we did that, then we did the infill housing standards, and we made those by right. Instead of just guidelines, we made them standards. So we made it easier to do. So that was, that next biggest little thing. And then the next biggest little thing was malls and corridors. So we said for the predominant commercial corridors within Winnipeg and mall sites, that Complete Communities 2.0 says, these are the places we want to incentivize growth. Let's make it so that people could either do exactly the zoning they were allowed to do already, or if they wanted to get more urban, here's an incentive to do that. You can build more, but you have to give gifts back to the street. My brother would call these gifts to the street when you start to, bring the buildings up to the street and start to address the street and create those external rooms and create those places that are delightful to walk in. So when you change those mall drive aisles to tree-lined streets and bring the buildings up to address those streets and create that mixture of compatible uses, so you don't even need to get in your car if you want to go to a variety of destinations. Then if they want to do all that, well, let's let them do that by right. Let's not bring them through a 12 to 18 month public hearing process where they have to ask for all of these special exceptions. And then so we did that deep listening session to the community to say, what would you be comfortable with? And to the landowners to say, what do you even want to build? And we just tried to find that common ground that was as close to the middle of those two conversations as we could get.
The other thing that happens when you bring the buildings closer, like you showed in your graphic during your TED Talk. Sorry, I keep bringing it back because it was so fascinating.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it, and you were so ahead of your time, I think. And we owe a big thanks to you. I always say that I learned so much of my urbanism from men in the industry, but it's so great to learn from you.
Thank you.
And one of the things that you do talk about in your TED Talk is that when you bring the buildings closer, not only do you make it more recognizable, but you slow down the cars, because they feel like this should be a little bit slower. I should drive a little slower here. There are tree canopies. There are bike lanes. Everything is a little narrower, so you make it more of a place. It doesn't feel so scary and dangerous.
And it's much easier to do that if you still have a wide, fast road somewhere so that people have a choice. I could still go here and save time on this link, or I could go here and I know I'm going to spend a little bit more time, but there's a place. And so that optionality is supremely important. Yeah, humans like options. By the way, you've taught me a lot as well.
Oh, okay.
Because, I'm a cyclist spring, summer, and fall. And then in the winter, I like to hop on the bus or walk the city a lot. I do own a car, but it's shared between the 3 adults in our family. So I like to leave it parked because it's enjoyable to me, and just to walk our city streets, or even to bus them and to be able to look out the window and really absorb what's happening here and analyze what needs some help, what might be missing. And of course, then absorbing the city at walking speed is delightful. So maybe someday you'll teach me how to how to winter cycle. But in the meantime, I love skiing to work on our frozen rivers.
So that's what I mean. One of the things that I talk about in my book is, Had I had the transit system I grew up with in Curitiba in Brazil, would I be a winter cyclist? Had I lived in a city where everything was walkable and I could walk to work, would I have been a winter cyclist? Likely not. I became a winter cyclist out of necessity. And the things that happened to me, I didn't expect. I thought I was saving money. I thought that was the only thing that was going to happen to me. But that side effect of being able to see the city at cycling speed, because in the winter I don't go as fast as I do in the summer.
Yeah.
And also in the summer I don't go as fast as when I drive. One of the things that I really talk about too is that, the person sleeping on the park bench is not a blur to me.
Yeah.
Like when I'm in my car.
That's true.
And I am able to see, this street here or this community, this restaurant. I've never noticed that before. There is a bike rack in front of it. I'm going to check it out next time.
Yeah.
Right? So it really changes your perspective of the city.
And it also lengthens your lifespan, right? By spending those hours on your bike.
Exactly.
On average, statistically speaking, you would be likely to lengthen your lifespan.
Yeah. People who ride their bikes to work call in sick 99% less.
Yeah.
So I like to tell my boss that it's the bonus that I give him.
That's right. That's right. That's great.
All I need is bike parking, and I never call in sick.
Exactly.
So one of the byproducts of slowing down streets, let's talk about women. Okay. How is that beneficial to have streets that are a little bit more calm?
It's beneficial in so many ways, right? And I think important ways are, the calmer the streets are, the more likely they are to be inhabited by a wide variety of people. And the more folks that we have in that urban realm, the safer it becomes. So for instance, in the winter, if I'm with my dog, Lydon, my Irish water spaniel, who's a little feisty, I'm more than happy to be on the river until 10:30 or 11 at night.
On the frozen river, for those who don't know.
On the frozen river, that's right. Because there's so many people out there on the walking trails or on the skating trails or on the skiing trails. There's so many eyes on the river in the winter time when it's frozen and groomed and delightful with the trees and the lights and the art and the music and the people. But in the summer, if I'm walking on the trails along the river, I would be reticent to be out there much after dark, even with my dog, because it's a different vibe, because at the moment, there aren't as many people down there. And so therefore, it's not quite as comfortable to women and non-binary individuals at those hours. So in a similar sort of way, I think our streets, the more lively they are, the more inhabited they are, then the safer they are. And so when they're slower, they tend to be more inhabited because they're behaving like a place, not like a link. And then additionally, women tend to be more caregivers. So they're more likely to be pushing a stroller or a wheelchair. And therefore, those slower speeds just make a big difference about whether or not you will need a Band-Aid or a coffin if you are in a collision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that, I wasn't going to bring this up, but one of the things that the police officer said to me on the phone when I had a close call with a driver who turned into me and grazed my boot because I guess he doesn't like cyclists, so instead of turning into his lane, he turned into me. And when I told the police officer that he grazed my boot, he says, well, if he really grazed your boot, your foot would have been broken, right? So I'm thinking, yes, maybe I start second guessing myself, but in a place where there would be a lot of people around, you wouldn't feel this type of intimidation. You wouldn't feel this type of awkward fear.
Yeah.
For a reason you don't even know.
Yeah, there's this
Right.
more public characters, more
Mm-hmm.
support system. When we moved to Winnipeg from Florida, 17 and a half years ago now, the first time my son went out to play street hockey, I think I told you, or in the TED Talk,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
went and sat on the curb and watched them, thinking
What
they're
is this?
playing in traffic. How am I going to get comfortable with this? But it was a skinny yield street, so of course it was fine. And the older kids would yell and get the little kids off of the street whenever there was a car. So it was pretty safe. Some people would argue it's a sticky street, but sticky for whom? And so
Mm-hmm.
there's still some, of course, ongoing equity issues that we, over time, are hopefully getting closer to solutions for. But in general, having those streets that are friendly to, the 8-year-olds and the 80-year-olds are super important.
Yeah, I've heard that term before.
As Gilles Penalosa would like to say.
Yeah, there you go. 8 and 80. My dad decided to give up his driver's license out of his own free will, decided that it was. So I'm very proud of him and for my mom, for both of them to make that decision. And in a place like Winnipeg, how much longer do you think? Here's the $600 million question. How much longer will it take for us to really see a place where seniors can get around any way they want? They can take the transit is fast and effective. Places are more walkable, and we don't have to be so car dependent.
My mother and father-in-law also made that decision. I think it was early last year, but they do live in Osborne Village. They walk everywhere. They take the bus different places. And if they are wanting to go somewhere where they don't like, the bus schedule to that destination, they'll hop in an Uber or a taxi or a Lyft, and they just get to where they're going. So I think we already are there in many of our more intense neighborhoods. I think it just depends on where you are. Even in Paris, there are plenty of no-go zones. In fact, one time when I was there, I opened a book that was on the coffee table, and there was a giant map, and it had all around the edge, mapped in certain areas, no-go zones.
Right.
Like, tourists do not go here. And so I don't know all of the reasons the author chose to make that map, but I think for folks who want to be car free in every city on earth, and it's not just Winnipeg, there are certain neighborhoods that you won't be car free anytime soon. That's why if you want to have a car light or a car free lifestyle, then you choose the more central neighborhoods in any city on earth, including Winnipeg.
Well, that brings me to my next topic and a question from one of my friends who is a big fan of yours. This question comes from Max, and he asked about these zoning reforms that are coming to Winnipeg. What are you hoping to bring from the downtown changes to the suburbs?
Great question, Max. Thanks for asking it.
I kind of rephrased it, but it's the essential.
That's a great question. There are different character areas in Winnipeg as a whole, and I don't see us ever recreating a downtown anywhere outside of downtown. Although, if you look at a new neighborhood like Southwood Circle that is happening on the north edge of University of Manitoba, that expects to, when it's fully built out, house 60,000 people in a car-free or car-light anyway environment. They haven't said car-free, but they certainly have said car-light environment. It will be being informed and inspired by Winnipeg based on what the illustrations on their website are looking like, inspired by downtown Winnipeg and the Exchange. But it will still be its own place and I think that when you look at it, the ways that you're seeing that inspiration already before, when they're just starting to have their initial buildings go up. But long before that, they planted all sorts of street trees, and they preserved every tree they possibly could from the Southwood golf course that was there before. And, they have planted all sorts of microforests and used that as bank stabilization along the Red River there. So many of the things that, the First Nations and Métis communities within the region have been doing for generations for that nurturing of green space and biodiversity. You're starting to see new neighborhoods really be informed and inspired by that, along with that walkable, compact, complete urbanism that's also convivial and connected. Ooh, that's a lot of C's.
That is a lot of C's, but it's great C's.
Yeah.
And we could add a DC to that, decolonization, when we pay attention to the way that things were done before colonization, right? We can really restore community.
That's right.
We can restore all of these feelings of places, right, that used to exist.
And I think that that's one thing that the Green Space Master Plan and Biodiversity Bylaw that we're working on right now, and co-development with 6 Indigenous nations and groups really seeks to do. It says, okay, well, we have all this walkable urbanism that you and I have been talking about for however long now, but also it's so important for those green and blue ways to connect them all and still being able to be the heart and lungs of the city. And so, the surface area of the earth, about 25% of it, per most studies, I would say that it's controlled by Indigenous nations and groups. But that accounts for about 80% of global biodiversity. So it's very wonderful right now on our co-development tables to be learning how we should re-indigenize the space in this way so that we can really be proper caretakers of it.
Great. I love thinking about that.
Yeah.
The next question came from Dylan, and Dylan knew exactly what he wanted to ask right away, and you know him, and he's very articulate. And he said, what is stopping you? It was kind of like between what you envision and what you can do. What is the barrier between those two things?
Time and money.
Yeah.
And it's really not even what I envision. My job in this role is different than my job for 20 years at Placemakers. My job in 20 years for Placemakers was coming up with the vision and helping the elected officials come up with the vision. My job here is to implement the vision that the elected officials in consultation with the community have articulated over time. And so always it's, they can write and adopt those very good policies, which they've done, which is why I took the job. And we can now write those regulations to implement those policies, but there are still those barriers of time and money to implement it. So many of the initiatives that I really enjoy to help address that. Of course, the funding streams from all 3 levels of government are so essential right now. Also, the Winnipeg Foundation is starting funding streams for pre-development construction costs. They're also starting land bank initiatives that will help support and move development along in Winnipeg to start to realize that collective community vision. But also I love initiatives such as the Incremental Development Alliance that shares their financial statements and different typologies for that incremental development. So whether it's a duplex or a triplex or a 4-pack or a cottage court, all of those which you can do by right now in Winnipeg, if the lot is wide enough and if there's, a paved back lane instead of a gravel back lane, all those details. So as long as the parameters are right, you can do those things. But not that many people have started doing them yet, even though that's been allowed by right since June 26th of this year. So people like the Incremental Development Alliance, who will come in and do multi-day workshops to train folks how to do this sort of construction and development, will be one of the things I think that can bridge that gap of time and money.
Education always comes in. Sort of, you have the hardware and the software, but you need to be able to get people to understand how they work.
Yeah.
So that you can really implement it.
And some places like, our neighbors 2 states to the south, the state of Minnesota is starting to finance a garden cottage if you want to do an accessory dwelling unit by giving you the money to do that, and you pay it back every month automatically on your property taxes. So they make it super simple.
Wow, that would be amazing.
Be able to have the money to build a second kitchen and then rent it out.
This episode is brought to you by Shifter's new online course, The Ultimate Guide to Bike Commuting and Urban Cycling. This course gives you all the knowledge you need to make the bike a bigger part of your daily life. It's created by Kaylin Klingbeil and Tom Babin. This is so fitting because Tom's YouTube channel was the catalyst for my winter cycling journey from casual bike rider to year-round bike commuter. Chances are you're already riding your bike a lot, but you might know someone who isn't and who would like to make the transition but just doesn't know how. I'm telling you, this is exactly what they need. Find the link to the course in the show notes and on my website at pattybikes.com/podcast. Wow, we are coming to the end, so I'm going to end with our rapid fire questions.
Okay.
The first one is, if you were a bicycle, what kind of bicycle would you be?
I love it. I would be the bicycle that I ride and love, which is a Cannondale, and it's a trail bike, but because I wanted the shocks in the front, but I cut down the handlebars to make it better in city riding. So I love that bike. I had a previous one that I rode for 19 years until I got relieved of it one dark night, but so I just replaced it.
We all at some point
with the same thing.
That's so great. I love that. I love that you feel that way about yourself too.
Versatile,
cut to size, get things done.
Yeah,
love it.
Oh, that's a good question. Thanks.
Yeah, right. Second question is, what is your superpower?
Chief herder of cats.
Yes, I've watched you herding a few.
I mean, everyone has their own mind, and no one more than a cat. And I think it's important for us to all find common ground, something that inspires us all to move in the same direction, and create some community.
That is so admirable. Well, we're going to end with a book recommendation. Do you have one by a female author?
I sure do.
Okay.
Could I do 2 or do
Yes,
I?
please.
Okay, fine.
I'd love it.
I would recommend Suburban Retrofit by Dr. Ellen Dunham Jones and Sprawl Repair by Galina Tchiva. So they're both very good friends of mine, full disclaimer. But they
extra special.
Have written these beautiful books that are super helpful for the sorts of work that most cities on Earth need to do to become a little bit more livable and a whole lot more lovable.
Love it. What is next for you? Any extra projects that you think you're going to tackle?
I think what's next for me is this 2 strong years ahead of us of deep listening to the community and trying to give them rules that they want to live by and really excel at. And then once that is adopted, hopefully, we'll be ready for council consideration by December 2027. Hopefully thereafter, just incubating and accelerating local businesses and developers to help them all collectively realize that dream.
Cool. If you were to tell someone somewhere else how they can start in their communities, what would you say step 1 would be?
breakfast club, to meet up with friends at a coffee house, to like convene that community, like my mom used to do in her health food store, just to, first of all, understand what everyone's doing. When I served on the Winnipeg Foundation board, my number one favorite thing was serving on the grants committee and just daylighting for myself all of the stories of the amazing people in our city doing really hard work, addressing impossible challenges and succeeding. And I think regardless of where you are on earth, having those community conversations to hear each other on what you're doing and how you could do it better together is where I'd start.
Awesome. We have that here with Coffee Outside. We try to get together in the warmer months between May long and Thanksgiving, just meeting with people who are riding their bikes or walking by, or even if they're driving by and want to stop and have a coffee. And I totally agree with you. The moment we start really hearing each other's stories, it makes a huge difference.
And your coffee is even delicious.
Isn't it? It's so good. Harrison's coffee.
You frequently pop up on a Assiniboine at Fort, where I pedal to, or at Gary, really.
Yeah, Assiniboine and Gary, yeah.
Where I pedal to, and it's fun to pop by and
grab a quick cup and chat,
hear what's happening. So thank you for doing that. It's brilliant.
You bet. We will thank Ian for convincing me that our Fridays off in the summer we should wake up at 5:30 instead of 6. But yeah, it's been huge. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you took the time today to talk to everyone and tell us your story. And I know that you're very inspiring to many. Thank you.
It's right back at you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I found this conversation so fascinating. There's so much to think about when planning a city that has places that are accessible to everyone. Now, when I was editing this episode, I caught something that she said that unless you're from here, you may have missed. She said she much prefers to walk down on the river in winter because even at 11 o'clock at night, it's full of people walking their dogs and enjoying the night as opposed to summer. And that's crucial to understand because the reason the river is so busy is because in the winter it freezes over and it becomes a walkable, skatable, skiable neighborhood set far away from any car traffic. I have made a few YouTube videos showing what that looks like, and if you're not from here, I urge you to check them out. People create beautiful frozen spaces on the river behind their homes to share with their neighbors and anyone walking by. I talk about this a lot in my book as well. We love walkable spaces so much, we'll even walk on water in minus 25 degrees to enjoy it. And I would be remiss if I didn't end today's episode with a word of love and encouragement to my friend and past guest, Laura Mitchell of episode 14, down in Minneapolis. I have no words, and I cannot comprehend what's actually happening down there. And I tell her all the time that I just need the word and I'll go pick her up at the border. But, it doesn't really work that way. She is tirelessly organizing, defending, and working in her community along with friends and strangers to defend her right to, I don't even know, just be. I love you, Laura, and please know that we're all thinking of you and sending you strength. Laura has posted a few links on Blue Sky where you can send donations. One of them is her neighborhood elementary school to help families with basic needs like food, winter gear, etc. via PayPal. It's paypal.me/LindalePTO. But there's also a massive vetted list which they're also on, and it's standwithminnesota.com. I'll post it on the show notes so that you can donate as well. I usually end my show by saying, for now, that's her problem. But the tongue-in-cheek title of this show, which highlights how her problem is really everyone's problem, has never been more true than today. Stay safe, friends, and don't just look out for one another. Get out for one another. Peace.